Hello, welcome to the second session in our online event series, Easy Ways to Refresh Your Home Without Renovating. My name's Jessica Doyle, I'm the Telegraph's Design and Interiors Editor, and over the next hour or so I have the pleasure of joining the wonderful floral stylist Willow Crossley here at her home in the Cotswolds. And Willow's going to show us how to create a colourful and wild floral arrangement to brighten up your home this spring. Now, Willow's an advocate of seasonal and sustainable floristry, which we'll talk more about in a minute. She's also written 4 books, designed hotel interiors, and recently launched an online floristry course, which you can find on the Create Academy website. So Willow, if we could start with a question from one of our readers, Jan, who doesn't have a garden, so can't grow her own flowers. She wondered if you could give some advice on where to source flowers and greenery.
Of course. So now it's kind of April, everything is growing in our gardens now, so the best place I would suggest is if you go onto a website called Flowers from the Farm, which if you put in your postcode of where you are, it gives you all the local growers and suppliers around you, so that would be, for Jan, my best advice.
Right, yeah.
So now is the time. I would always, for creating any arrangement, I would definitely try and buy local and seasonal flowers. There are so many kind of flowers that we have through the year which are grown all over the world, but now more than ever, kind of March through to October in Britain is just the most beautiful stuff. So always try and go local if you can.
Right.
So yeah.
And what kind of flowers are you going to be using today?
So today I've got a mix from my garden. I have got some from Holland because I just needed a lot. And I have also got some from local growers. So my lovely friend Jo at Wilcott Blooms round the corner. And yeah, my garden and Holland. So I've been gardening all these beautiful blossoms are all from 5 minutes away.
Yeah.
The spireas from my garden, hellebores. I did buy those snake's head fritillaries because I have about 10 in my garden and I can't face cutting them. And this jasmine I really wanted for that kind of lovely trailiness.
Yeah.
I've got ranunculus, and these are my favourite things in the whole world. These are Solomon seal, and they come out in May for about 3 weeks of the year, and they are my reason for living. I love them so much. And we've got sweet peas, lilac sweet peas, cream ranunculus and lilac. So it's very pink, it's very pretty and girly, and I kind of go through these stages of wanting either kind of clean green and white, and I'm just in a really pink frothy stage at the moment. So
it smells lovely as well.
Good.
I think it's really gorgeous.
Good.
And so with conditioning, so but before you start arranging the flowers, how do you condition them?
Okay, so whether they're from the garden, from a florist, wherever they've come from, they all need the same care, basically, which is conditioning. So let's say we've cut them. If you're going to cut them yourself, you want to pick them first thing in the morning or last thing at night when the stems are kind of filled with most water, never kind of in the heat in the middle of the day. And then you want to kind of bring them in. So I picked these this morning. This is wild rubus. And I would basically prepare the stem how you're going to use it. So I cut always at an angle, so this creates a kind of much larger surface area, so it means the stems can drink more. So if you cut it straight across, the surface area is smaller. And then remove any excess leaves. So for example with tulips, I've got these tulips here. The leaves are really beautiful, but if you think all flowers are the same, they drink up through here, so the leaves are going to get the water before the head does.
Right.
So you want to remove kind of excess leaf, essentially. So I might leave that on, but then I'd remove that, cut it on an angle, and then plunge straight into water again. In a dream world, I would get flowers. Say I wanted to make an arrangement on Tuesday, I would get the flowers, cut the flowers on the Monday, and I would condition them, remove all the excess leaves, cut the bottoms, and then I'd plunge them into water, kind of up to their necks ideally, and leave them in the cool, dark for kind of 24 hours if I could. That's dream world. If you just reversing a bit, when you buy flowers in a flower shop, you take them home and they seal the bottoms shut, and this is kind of self-preservation. So you must always, the minute flowers have been taken out of water, you want to recut them so their drinking channels are open again. And then that gives them, they'll come back to life again.
Right.
Okay, so and I think conditioning as well, a really good pair of secateurs is essential, because if you've got a blunt rubbish pair, you're kind of, when you cut, you're crushing, and they're not going to drink as well. So nice, sharp, clean lines, really important. Keep them out of direct sunlight. Keep them as cool as you can. So this is my studio, and I haven't got any doors. You probably no one else can see, but it's really cold in here, so everything stays really kind of fresh. If I want things to speed up and come out, I'll bring them into the house. So if you buy flowers from somewhere like those tulips, they're quite tightly shut, and you want them to come out for a party or for Easter or whatever, bring them into the house, and the warmth will speed them up.
Right.
So yeah, keep them cool, give them a good drink, cut on an angle, pick early in the morning if you can.
Yeah.
So those are probably my best conditioning tips.
Right. We've had another question from Michelle, who wondered how you go about choosing the size of vase or vessel that you're going to use for an arrangement.
Okay, good question. So for me, I always know well, you can be led by what flowers you want to use or where you want the arrangement to go. So for example, if you just want something for your kitchen table, personally I would always go for kind of little babies, kind of like, you know, little things like this, and I would have lots drop down the middle of my table. But if you wanted a big hallway arrangement that's going to be seen from 360 degrees, then I would go bigger. I would go kind of something like this, or even bigger, the stars. So think about the location where it's going. If you're picking flowers from your garden and you only have kind of tiny little things, then that's going to dictate what you're going to use. So as a general rule, it's a kind of average guide. You want your proportion of your flowers to be 1.5 times the height of your vase.
Right, okay.
So that doesn't mean that, so that's kind of a bit high, but that doesn't mean to say it's going to be like a square. That's just kind of the shape, the highest point of the shape will be around that, give or take a couple of centimetres, but use that as a guide, 1.5 times the height.
Right.
So often people get given flowers and they go home and they've only got a pint glass to put them in, and they stick out the top like this. It's just like, no, it's awful. So the proportion is, to me, probably up there in the kind of top 3 most important bits. So think about that as your guide, maybe.
Yeah.
Colour's another really good place to start. So if you know that you want kind of pink flowers or something, you think about what container you've got with that. If you only got a kind of certain colour, is it going to go with that? So colour and size and what flowers you've got are good guides.
And do you have a preference for sort of glass or ceramic, or do you sort of use a mix of both?
I use a mix of both. I have my real favourites, and I go through stages of loving a certain shape. Some shapes are much harder. So, for example, something like this it needs chicken wire, and it's a kind of, a labour of love is probably too strong a word, but it requires effort. Whereas I love jugs, kind of, and things like this. This Wedgwood one is beautiful shape. It's in at the neck, and it's kind of not too big, so you can kind of do it in your sleep and just chuck them in.
Right.
So it depends on my energy levels, and again where it's going to go. But I collect kind of little. I collect all vases, but little baby ones that are so easy, and I keep them on my kitchen table all the time. So if I'm kind of going on a walk, I can snip a little something and chuck her in. It's a really good way actually of seeing what's in season throughout the year.
Yeah. Where do you look for vases and vessels and things? Where do you buy them from?
Honestly, everywhere. But I love buying old kind of vintagey jugs are my favourite. Kind of second-hand shops, eBay, Etsy. We've got an amazing one down the road here called Station Mill, which is a kind of loads of different antique sellers. And yeah, I mean, wherever I can. Supermarket, there's a beautiful old like olive oil tin cans, can be really beautiful. I quite like kind of a baked bean tin can, like peel all the paper off. That kind of silver rigidness is quite pretty if you paint them. So much of floristry is kind of, I guess, when you're getting onto the kind of more event side of things, so much of it is about the containers and hiding things, and you see these incredible arches and things, and you're like, wow, that's so beautiful. But if you took it all away, underneath it's filled with kind of empty half water bottles and kind of yogurt pots and all that. I have kind of cupboards filled with saved yogurt pots and baked bean tin cans. It's really unglamorous.
So could we talk a bit about the vessel you're using today, this bowl?
Yes, so this is a mantle vase. I think it's an old Wedgwood, but I just love the shape of them. I was going to do a bowl, because basically the technique I wanted to share is using chicken wire, because less and less people are using floral foam, because it's terrible for the environment. So I wanted to show how easy it is to use chicken wire to replace it. And this is just an old French bowl that I love, and I use the same technique for both. But I thought that I've got quite big lilac heads here, and which I wanted to use, but proportionately they would have been too big.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
So if you're wanting to do this, you can use the technique for in the same way for big, medium, tiny. Like, so I've got these little sugar bowls, and I often scrunch these up with chicken wire as well. And again, I thought I'd just share these. These are flower frogs, spiky pins, and they're another. So we either use to replace the floral foam, the flower frog, or the wire.
Okay.
So with the pins, you would just kind of spike them on.
Right. Yeah.
So when you're choosing your container, think about the size of your flowers. So you wouldn't want to use huge flowers and little ones. So for something like this little baby, I've been using snowdrops recently. Daffodils would probably be a bit big for that. Yeah. So just think how they look in each one before you select your one. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I'm going to use this. And these are, traditionally they're mantle vases, so they would go on your mantelpiece. But I love them for a sideboard. I love them down the middle of the table. And I think when you're, sorry if I'm repeating myself, but when you are making an arrangement, think about where it's going to go. So if this is going to go on a kitchen table, for example, you want to be able to see your friend across the table, so you don't want to make it really high. So often those are better because it's a bit lower for a kitchen table. But I am going to put this in my hallway, so it only needs to be seen from kind of 3/4 or half. So I'm going to start. Should we start?
Yeah.
Okay. So I've got, this is chicken wire. This I've cut off a huge roll. I mean, it's just, it's literally for making chicken pens. And
do you just get that from a garden centre?
Yeah, garden centre. It's, if you type in chicken wire floristry onto online, it comes as hundreds. But you can buy huge reels, kind of that thick, which kind of 60 metres for, I think, £20. You obviously, if you do this for a little bit, you don't need huge rolls. So this is the galvanised stuff, which I get just purely because it's nicer to my hands, because it can be quite tough working with it kind of all the time. So I cut a length off. I don't really have a rule about a kind of specific sizings, but if you try and envisage that we want to scrunch it up. So I've cut it. It's probably kind of 3 times the size of that, really. And then very simply what I'm going to do is scrunch it up. And then I'm going to slot it into the container.
So this is what's going to hold the flowers in place.
So because it's going to hold the flowers in place, and I've got some quite heavy stems like that lilac, and the blossom is quite heavy. So you want to make it, it's really good and strong. You want to make it so it's covering as much, it's evenly spread. Does that make sense? So kind of spread them around, share it all out. And people always ask, does it want to come out? Does it want to go under? It really doesn't matter, I don't think. And then we're going to hold it in place. This is pot tape, green pot tape, clear. This is, to me, quite a new invention, as in we've always had to deal with this. But when you're working on a cream one, and something that is quite low down and will probably be seen quite up close, it's quite a good idea to use this one. And this one is really splitting, but I don't mind about that, because the thinner the piece, the better, because if you imagine if it's really thick, you're blocking any stems being added in that bit. So I'm just going to hold it down. This tape is waterproof as well.
Okay.
So put it down, kind of give yourself as much as you can around there without making it too obvious. And then I'm going to do the same again about there. And all this is doing is holding the wire in place. Okay. And then I'll kind of have a nice strategically placed leaf or something to hide those little bits. So can you see it's completely not going anywhere?
Yeah.
Okay. So, water. Where have I put my water? Here. So we're going to fill it up.
And would you use cold water or room temperature water, or does it not matter?
I don't actually even think about about the temperature. Although saying that, if I'm trying to force things to come out, like peonies, which we're about to get, or tulips, if they're really clamped, I will often put them in warm water. I have no idea if it actually makes a difference, but no, I just give them what comes out the tap.
Right.
I probably should have said actually, what's really important is that you always make sure your containers are really clean, but just because it will extend your vase life, so they will last longer. If you put something in a really dirty vase with dirty water, it's going to breed the bacteria, which will kill them quicker.
Right.
So you can get Milton Sterilite, you know, those baby sterilising tablets, they're quite good. Or Fairy Liquid apparently leaves a kind of horrible film, which also breeds bacteria.
Yeah.
Or we put them in a dishwasher, is your best. That's what I do. Okay, so full clean water. Always check your water levels because they drink so much. Tulips especially are so unbelievably thirsty. I have got lots of flowers here today, rather than often I have full foliage, and so I kind of make it so it's kind of 70% finished with just foliage, but because we've got so many beautiful bits, I'm going to kind of mix it in. Usually I would do foliage first, but I'm going to do a bit of both now. So we've got our water, we've got the wire in place, and we're ready to go.
Great.
So I picked a bit of this rubus, which I'm going to start with. So with chicken wire, the thing to remember is really important that your stems have to be completely not poker straight, clean.
Right.
So any little knobbles, or I mean they can be mini, will cause chaos, because you bring them in, you put them into wherever you want them, but if you've got a little knobble sitting there, you pull it out again and it'll all get caught.
Right.
Which when you've just got one in, it's fine, but when you're right at the end and you're trying to get it out and the whole thing goes everywhere. So try and remember that. So really clean stems. Okay. So in the beginning, I try and make a shape of what I want the arrangement to be. My style is very wild and natural, so I want it to be airy. I love a bit of negative space. I want to be able to kind of see through. So I love this kind of green of the rube, that vibrant, clean. Even tiny little babies like that, can you see they've got to come off?
Yeah.
So I think that's probably where people might kind of fall down first, using chicken wire. They kind of get into a muddle. And you just kind of jiggle them around, because it can be a little fiddly. And it's one of those things that the more you practice, the easier it gets. And then I've got these beautiful blossoms.
Wow.
Aren't they incredible?
How long will these last for, the blossoms?
I picked these 3 days ago, and I've kept them really cool. Another tip, which I should have said with conditioning, is that you can sear things. So that means when you pick them, as soon as you pick them, you boil the kettle, and you plunge about 10% of the length, say it was this little piece, so about 10% of the length of the stem into the boiling water.
Right.
For about the thinner the stem, the less time. So these snakes have fritillaries, for example, are really dainty and thin, and you probably do them for 10 seconds. Whereas these chunky woody ones, you could do for up to 30 seconds.
And that will then keep them...
Yeah, it kind of, the heat kind of bursts through all the air bubbles, so then they drink better again. It's all about them getting as much moisture as they can.
Yeah.
So there are certain flowers that I would do that with a lot more, like roses, love it, hellebores, always, lilac. Okay. So in these early stages, it's just about kind of creating your shape, cutting the babies.
And so it's all sort of fairly low at the moment. And
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to go that high with this because proportionately that just wouldn't work. I might have one bit shooting out. And it's really important, even if you're just doing it, that you're only looking at the front, to kind of step away from it and kind of turn it around. And often I do it and I hate it and I have to start again and I rip it all out. I'm going to work on it this way for now. I mean, I love making these just full of just pure blossom. I think it's so magical. It's such a fleeting amount of time we have this blossom for.
Yeah.
And you always want to think about bringing things out the front. So you don't want to look at something and you've got the neck of the vase and then the flower shooting out the top. You want it kind of to very gracefully kind of spill out.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
So you're sort of partly covering the top of the bowl. Yeah.
And I got the jasmine so because I love that kind of spilly feel. And can you see that? You always want to use the shape of the flower, so don't ever fight it and be like, oh no, but I want to go over there because she'll win. So I'm going to bring her down here. Do you see?
Yeah.
I want her there. Bring her there. Oh, so pretty already. And this is, I always remember, I went to flower school for like 5 days. And one of the things I learned, which I found the hardest thing, is just because you've got a really beautiful flower, it doesn't mean that you have to use it all. So for example, that's just too big, it's too chunky. So as heartbreaking as it is, I need to snip some of it off. I think that needs to go too. And then, but don't waste that. I won't waste that. She'll just go in another little vase and I'll reuse her. But often if you just try and make do because it's there, your arrangement won't work.
Right.
I know that sounds really bossy. Okay, so I'm just jiggling around. So I'm guess I'm making my shape with the blossom now.
And do you sort of make the shape up as you go, depending on the way the flowers are going?
Yeah. It's quite hard, I think, for you to. I mean, when I'm making an arrangement, I've got it in my head how I vaguely want it to look, but it doesn't work if you're trying to say, right, this is going to go here and that's going to go there. It never works like that. Okay, so let's see if you look both ways. I always rather love that way more. Okay, I'm just going to keep going. So we've got this blossom too, which I might add a bit in at the end, but I feel that it's almost a bit big to go in this. She'd rather suit going in a massive arrangement.
Right.
Okay, so now I'm going to do some lilac. I want a really light bit. Okay. So lilac's a really good example of don't use it all because it's so big. So I'm going to take, and this upsets me, it's taking the little babies off. But that kind of little size is great. Lilac is, it can be quite diva-ish in that often you pick it and she drops down dead a couple of days later. So I would always see a lilac. There are lots of people say, oh, should I bash the stems? People always think you should bash woody stems. Some people, lots of great florists think that, yes, they do. I don't subscribe to that because to me, I think that if you bash it, you're creating more surface area for the bacteria. So I just cut it very sharp and then up the stem because that increases the drinking area again.
Right.
So I do that with Guelder Rose as well. Now, which way am I going to go? I'll come this way again. Okay. So when you're cutting flowers down, you always want to kind of go on the longer side because nothing worse than when you cut it too short, you can't get it back. So as a guide, kind of think where you want it to go and then hold up the stem against the vase. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I kind of want them to nestle in. This is really... So when you're making any arrangement, it's really important to have a mix of shapes. So this is kind of the leading lady, the main big one, and your eyes tend to be drawn to those ones. So as well as these, I've got the fillers, I've got the kind of wispy ones, I've got the foliage. That's my foliage really in here, and some more fillers from the sweet peas, and then the kind of size down from the ranunculus. So if you had all the same size and shape, they would just kind of sit up against each other and they wouldn't kind of look so natural. So think about having that mix. And whilst you're doing that with the main leading ladies, you want odd numbers.
Right.
So I would never just have 2. I would have 3, or I'd have 5 or 1. That makes sense?
Yeah, yeah. And would you have them at sort of different heights as well? So 100%. It's kind of asymmetrical. And
yes.
Yeah.
Oh, let's see. I'm ignoring myself. I haven't cut the knobbles off. So it's really important for that reason, to see that they're not all sitting on the same line, to kind of take a step back and keep turning it around. And so you can see how it's kind of looking there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to keep going. I know I've only got 2 in there at the moment, but I'm going to add other things and then add, because you do want to bear in mind where the big ones are going to go, so you don't run out of space. That makes sense. Okay, so who we're going to have some now? I think we're going to have ranuncular. So these are cream ranunculars, and these, oh my god, I'm obsessed with these. These are pickety striped ranunculars. Have you ever seen a ranunculus? Aren't they amazing?
The colours, yeah.
And these ranunculars are incredible. They last for, I've had some on the go for kind of months and months. So they're a really great thing. And they just get better and better as they get older. So so this, for example, going back to the conditioning, they arrive kind of like this. And you want to remove, I'm not throwing them away, I'm keeping them, but I just, nice clean stem, remove all the leaves, because I know I'm only going to use the heads for these. Same again. So cleaning them. And then these little babies I will keep, because it's really nice having these kind of little, tiny, little rounder shapes. And you keep thinking about the different sizes. Okay.
And how many of these do you think you'll use?
I don't know, because everything else is quite pink. Part of me thinks that the white might be too white, so I might need at least 3 or 5 to balance it and kind of make it feel like they're meant to be there. And again, like with the lilac, you want to mix where they're going to be in.
Yeah.
See that? So they're all different heights.
Yeah. And would you always have one, like this one is sort of facing forwards towards the middle, so it's like got a
Not necessarily. I'm going to kind of introduce a few down here as well, kind of on the neck. We want to always break that neck up.
Right.
That sounded really awful. So I'm kind of wanting to, I feel like I'm playing with the ranunculus now, so I want to kind of intersperse them out throughout the whole thing. And I kind of feel I want one wisping out the top. She might move in a minute, I think. Actually, I'm going to keep that one on. So holding her up there. I think I've cut her too short, that's annoying.
I suppose that's one of the advantages of using the chicken wire as well, that you can take things out and easily and put them in a different place. And
Totally.
Yeah.
So can you see here that I've tried to include it, but actually that's almost like when you're trying to make do a certain shape of flower, because she's not behaving. So I'm actually going to take her out, put her back in on a different level, and then I'll add her in. Clean stem on an angle. I'll add her down a bit lower. You see, it almost looks like a little bit of blossom.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to add my baby in. So this is, I mean, the green is just so beautiful. So she's kind of, in my head, she's a foliage.
Yeah. What was the name of this one again?
Solomon seal. Polygonatum is
seal.
her proper name. And I just love the way she's like a kind of big lily of the valley, almost. They look related. So I'm going to have her kind of dancing out the top. In fact, I'm going to, oh no, she's going to go over there. And so much of it is just experimenting with how it feels and how they behave. And as I said, I kind of often start again. And I might kind of do a bit more and then pull her out again. So with these ones, there's always this lower leaf. So I'm going to pull that off.
And so for people who are maybe a bit nervous about, you know, not that experienced in flower arranging, would you say it's just sort of about having fun with it and experimenting and just changing it if you don't like the shape
100%.
until you have a shape that you like?
100%, yeah. And just people first, when I do lots of workshops and people are so scared that they're going to damage them or it's not right, and I just think that I also have so many messages now from children saying I'm getting into it like from the age of 4, and I think it's such a incredible kind of emotionally healing, wonderful thing to get into. It doesn't need to be stressful. It is so calming when you if you don't take it too seriously. And I think if you've got really great ingredients and good containers, then you can't really go wrong. And proportion. I'm very fussy about proportion. So I want this kind of coming in. Yeah, do you see that? I love that.
Yeah.
Kind of dripping over the side. You see this bit here.
And so far there's only about, I think there's 4 different varieties of flower there.
Blossom,
yeah.
lilac, Solomon seal, ranunculus times 2.
Yeah, yeah.
But there's not many flowers
There's
in
so
there.
much variety because of the different heights and shapes.
Exactly. And yeah, it's very easy to just kind of keep going and keep going. Obviously there's a lot of space still, so I will. Who else have we got? Oh, the snake's heads. So these are just so magical. These are from the fritillary family, and these are the snake's head one. Can you see the kind of checkerboard? They look like a snake skin.
Yeah.
And they are definitely one of my spring highlights. I'm going to cut off these leaves. They just peel down. I'm going to keep those 3, just purely because I like the look of them. I'm really drawn to kind of drippy flowers, if that makes sense. So the kind of the bells and these kind of how they drip down. Where are more babies? Oh no, I think I just lost a head. Look at those. And as they age, they get lighter. You can also get these in white, which are they're harder to get hold of. So you can see I'm bringing that out there. So pretty.
Yeah, they give it a completely different
They kind of
sort
toughen
feel,
it up a bit, don't they?
Yeah, yeah.
Because the lilac and the blossom and those ranunculus can be a bit kind of sickly pretty, if that makes sense. But I think these, yeah, they toughen it up a bit. You see, so it's very wayward, wild. So I'm keeping this back bit kind of empty because I don't want to waste flowers.
Yeah.
I don't need them. They can, because I could. That's a whole other arrangement if we'd filled the whole thing. We just don't need it. So I've got these hellebores. So these I picked this morning in the garden as well, and I love that milky light colour again. It's kind of related to the Solomon seal. The best trick with these, which I have learned the hard way, is that, can you see these seed heads, the pods? When these develop, when they first come out a couple of months ago, there you go. This one, for example, doesn't really have one. It's still kind of it's not really there. When you pick them like that, they're not ready to be used. They wilt very, very quickly. But if you wait till a bit later in the season, they've got that toughened, kind of chunky pod, that's when they're ready to use.
Right. And so then they'll last longer, or they'll be
Yeah.
stronger.
They won't die at that 4 seconds of being picked. Another great tip with these is, which I learnt from an amazing florist called Klaus Darby, is he goes out with his bucket of water and he picks them, and he slices along the stem and puts them straight into water because they're notoriously very diva-ish.
Right.
I don't even bother picking them really early into the season because I just have no luck, and I'd rather they were in the garden. She is a bit of a past it, but with these, I just adore that colour, and you get them in so many different colours, obviously. But I am going to just introduce this. No, it's too short. So cutting the knobbles off, using the shape. I'm going to just feed her in here. Actually, I find the hellebore leaf is quite a tough green. It's quite leathery, and in this arrangement it feels a bit heavy. So I'm going to carefully, famous last words, I'm going to bring her in here. And again, it's another shape. Can you see it's quite a kind of flat one? It's a real mix for what we've got in there. What you do want to be careful is that you don't want to add too much in that, too many shapes. So it's quite a fine line. I hope I'm not making this too complicated and terrifying. In fact, I'm actually going to take her out. She doesn't need to be in there. After all that, I do that a lot. So, I want this one as well, so another. So I love kind of positioning a flower so it's shooting backwards, even though I'm not filling the back, because it implies, it kind of gives it a bit more depth. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. You sort of get a different perspective on the flower, don't you? If you see it from a different angle.
Exactly. Who else are we going to have in there? I've got some Senecchio from my garden, but I think she's a little heavy. Sorry, without taking your head off. This is Spirea, which is one of my favourite spring foliages, shrubs. This one isn't. There's one called Snow Mountain. That's my absolute favourite thing in the world. The only thing you have to be careful with her is that she has this pretty flower at the end, but then she's very woody, which can look quite dark. But I think with this kind of softness going on everywhere, I think we're going to be fine. But I don't know if she's necessary. Let's try her. Oh, I've got the jasmine, don't let me forget that. Actually, that's just got a little bit. I don't think we need her, do you?
Not sure.
This might be a bit too much. I'll try one more. That's quite pretty.
Yeah, now it's there.
Yeah, is that three odd numbers?
Yeah.
Okay, now I'm going to try and do the jasmine. Look at this. This is like, I mean, the dream, the jasmine. Okay, so with the jasmine, I got this because I love the trail that it creates. So I want that to kind of spill out over the side. So some of it is very little, but often there's a bit that will kind of shoot upwards. Please be a bit.
And you can buy jasmine like this from a florist or.
Yeah, I mean
centre,
it's not the easiest thing to find, but it is in season now. I've got this pot of jasmine I've had for about 4 years, and she's flowering now. In fact, actually, my best thing I often do if I'm kind of doing weddings and I want it is I buy the plants, and often they're in those kind of round loops. Have you seen them in garden centres?
Yeah.
And I often buy those, and then I untangle them and I use them as plants, and then you can reuse them again, because it can be extortionately expensive to buy it in this way. I mean, look at that, the scent of that.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Oh. Okay, so this has turned into like a fully pink. Is she going to stand up? It's like a jungle. But like I said, I'm not going to fill the whole thing. You just want, I don't want to be able to see any chicken wire. I love the space, but you can see it. I need something else in here. So I think I might try one more ranuncular. And kind of dig her in, although they're quite big. I have got those sweet peas, but I think they're going to be a bit sickly in there, so I'm not going to bring them in. So I'm going to then nestle this last ranuncular, possibly the last ranuncular, in quite low down, lower than that. and that will kind of hide.
Yeah.
And then, like with any arrangement, you just kind of take, again, another, sorry, I keep saying step back, but take a step back, see. Oh, another snaky. You see I've got this kind of gap here. That's making me pretty happy. I need one at the back there. No, can you see? Then they're just shooting out there and that doesn't work. Could go back again. No, she doesn't need to come in. It's a really good lesson to know when to stop.
Yeah.
Which I have not grasped yet. Actually, so these little blibby bits now are really nice. Just add in a tiny filler. I think I need to stop now.
Yeah.
Let me see.
So you can see that you can't, from that front angle, you can't see
Exactly.
any of the chicken wire, any of the tape, and you've covered over bits of the edge of the vase.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is talking about the ugly mechanics of it behind. You would never know. So kind of this ugly bit compared to that.
Yeah.
And then looking after her, she's obviously coming inside where I have heating on still, and so they will. And there's a lot of flowers in there. Well, not a lot, but they will drink. So with a ceramic one compared to a glass one, if it's a glass, you can see the water level. So you just must remember. And how I would top her up was I would just pour water in.
Okay.
I wouldn't kind of try and empty it out and start again. I'd just keep topping up with fresh water. I check it every day.
Right.
Yeah. And then, because it's quite a big arrangement, some things will last more time than others. So the lilac and blossom will probably go first. And rather than kind of chucking it all in the bin or on the compost heap afterwards, I dismantle them and I then kind of whittle down. So I've got lots of bud vases with lovely coloured rims that I design, and I would then kind of decant.
Right.
And so you could probably do the bowl. You could do it again with the ones that are still going, and then get smaller and smaller and smaller, and then go down to bud vases. But you would kind of, some like the ranunculus will last for a really long time. So, yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Should we turn it round
Yeah.
slightly so that we can talk about it? Yeah. And do you ever use anything like flower food or bleach or anything like that in the water to keep the flowers lasting longer?
I don't. I get there. So many people do. I don't. I just keep. So the bleach is used to keep the water clean and kill the bacteria, whereas my thought is to keep the water really clean and the container container clean from the start, so you don't need it.
Yeah. Okay.
Flower food, when you buy it, some of the lilac and the Guelder rose, the really woody ones, it comes with it. And if I'm kind of in the mood, I might chuck it in, but as a rule, I don't really. Someone's once told me that it's quite like giving us a can of Coke. You get that immediate yay, and then afterwards.
Right.
If you're trying to maybe make things great for 24 hours for a party, then I might think about it, but otherwise I just don't think. If you do all your conditioning and your care, then you shouldn't need it.
Yeah. It looks so beautiful. I mean, even from this angle too, it looks really stunning.
Well, I think it's the flowers. So yeah, my advice would be to find really good growers.
Right.
There are so many around, and it's not just here in the country. It's all over. It's people in cities that are amazing growers too. So yeah, have a look for them.
Thank you so much, Willow. It looks absolutely beautiful.
Such a pleasure.
I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who's joined us for this series. Hope we've given you lots of ideas and inspiration for refreshing your home. And we'll see you next time.